when a text message arrived from my narcissistic mother cutting my triplets and me from a luxury cruise to appease my entitled brother. She thought she was pulling off the ultimate power move. She confidently claimed they only wanted real family on the ship, completely unaware that the multi-million-dollar global supply contracts keeping her own business alive were entirely controlled by my private logistics corporation. Within 2 hours, I didn't just cancel their cruise. I completely cut off their global shipping licenses, liquidated the family estate, and triggered a total financial blackout that permanently dismantled their entire empire before their flight even left the tarmac. When they finally tried to check into the terminal, they didn't just lose a vacation. They found themselves completely broke, facing a federal corporate audit and staring at a dead screen with 43 frantic missed calls. My name is Vanessa, and I had to learn the hardest lesson a daughter can ever face. Sometimes the people who demand absolute loyalty from you are the exact same ones who will trade your dignity for a cheap family photo. The total spectacular demolition of my family's comfortable illusion took place on a crisp, high-stress Thursday morning in August 2025. I was sitting at the breakfast table in my quiet sunlit kitchen in Denver, packing small fruit slices and organic sandwiches into 3 identical school lunch boxes for my 5-year-old triplets, Owen, Miles, and their sister June. The house smelled of fresh blueberry muffins and the kids were giggling in the background, completely dressed in their tiny matching school outfits. That peaceful morning routine was instantly shattered by a loud, sharp vibration from my phone on the granite countertop, revealing a text message from my mother that would change our lives forever. To truly understand how a simple text message could trigger a multi-million-dollar asset liquidation, you have to understand the toxic financial structure of my family. My mother, Eleanor, was a fiercely proud old-school woman who ran a regional manufacturing firm based in Cleveland that had been on the verge of complete bankruptcy for nearly a decade. My younger brother Preston was her absolute favorite. A deeply spoiled, material-obsessed man who spent his days running a failing luxury lifestyle blog and demanding expensive gifts to maintain his superficial online presence. When our father passed away 5 years ago, Eleanor completely checked out of her financial responsibilities, focusing all her remaining energy on coddling Preston and treating my triplets as an inconvenient burden because I had chosen to raise them as an independent, unmarried mother. What Eleanor and Preston completely failed to acknowledge was that I wasn't the weak, dependent girl they tried to dominate. 10 years ago, I started a private global trade infrastructure and logistics management corporation that quietly grew into an incredibly lucrative enterprise. Because I despised flashy luxury brands, drove a simple mid-size SUV, and wore unbranded clothing, my family completely assumed my business was just a tiny, struggling freelance operation. They were so blinded by their own arrogance that they never looked at the official legal paperwork of their daily lives. 3 years ago, when Eleanor's manufacturing firm was about to lose its international shipping licenses due to massive debt, I secretly stepped in to save them. I used my corporate network to buy out their primary debt, took absolute ownership of the commercial land their factory stood on, and single-handedly authorized the global supply chain routes that allowed her factory to export goods. I let Eleanor and Preston live completely rent-free in the massive family estate owned by my holding firm, letting them believe they were high society elites while they treated me like a financial afterthought. The boiling point arrived when Eleanor announced a massive high-profile family cruise to celebrate Preston's engagement to a wealthy corporate attorney. Preston spent months meticulously planning the trip, selecting a premium ultra-luxury Caribbean cruise suite package that cost a staggering $45,000. Because Eleanor's company was completely short on cash, she came to my office crying, begging me to put the entire cruise package, flights, and premium excursions onto my corporate credit card, promising that she would repay me the moment her winter contracts cleared. For the sake of giving my triplets a beautiful summer vacation with their grandmother, I agreed, processing the massive deposit and final payments through my firm. But Preston's toxic insecurity couldn't handle sharing the spotlight with my beautiful children. He wanted a picture-perfect high-society cruise vacation where he was the undisputed center of attention. And he spent weeks whispering venomous lies into our mother's ear about how my triplets would ruin the formal dining nights and the aesthetic of his engagement photos. That brought us straight back to that humid Thursday morning. I picked up my vibrating phone and my blood turned entirely to ice as I read the cold, calculated text message from Eleanor. Plans changed, Vanessa. I talked it over with Preston last night, and we've decided that you and the kids aren't coming on the cruise anymore. Preston wants only real, traditional family structures on this ship for his engagement photos, and your presence makes things complicated with his future in-laws. Don't cause a scene or make this difficult. We will talk when we get back in 2 weeks. I stood completely frozen in my kitchen, the phone trembling slightly in my hand as I looked over at Owen, Miles, and June, who were happily drawing pictures of large cruise ships on the kitchen table. The sheer unadulterated cruelty of a grandmother throwing her own grandchildren off a vacation that I had completely paid for was a level of betrayal I couldn't ignore. They wanted to treat me like a nameless wallet while publicly stripping away my dignity. I didn't reply to the text. I didn't type out a long emotional paragraph crying about their unfair treatment. And I didn't give them the satisfaction of a desperate phone call. I took a deep, steadying breath, knelt down to kiss my children on their foreheads, and quietly decided to show my family exactly what happens when the foundation they stand on decides to walk away. I grabbed my car keys, drove straight to my corporate headquarters, and called an emergency session with my executive legal team and my chief financial officer. Within 45 minutes, we had the entire strategy mapped out with cold mathematical precision. Since the luxury cruise reservation, premium flight tickets, and private island excursions were completely registered under my corporate credit card and my company's corporate identity profile, I had the absolute legal authority to manage the assets. I instructed my CFO to immediately initiate a total high-priority fraud protection cancellation on the entire $45,000 travel package, pulling every single cent of funding straight back into my firm's primary account. Next, I turned my attention to my extra strong retaliation against their business. I invoked the immediate default clauses in the supply chain contracts my logistics firm held over Eleanor's factory. Because she had missed her technical debt repayment deadlines, my legal team issued an immediate emergency freeze on all of her international shipping routes and seized her factory's entire warehouse inventory as legal collateral. Simultaneously, I dealt with the family estate. For the past 6 months, a major commercial development corporation had been desperately trying to buy that exact residential block in Cleveland to construct a massive medical plaza, offering a highly inflated cash price of $750,000 for the property. Because I had kept the house deed completely clean under my private holding company, I bypassed the traditional real estate market entirely. I called the commercial buyer's legal team directly, agreed to their exact cash offer, and signed the expedited corporate liquidation paperwork by 2 o'clock that afternoon. As part of the emergency fast-track sale, the commercial buyers required immediate unencumbered possession of the property to begin demolition the following Monday morning. I immediately hired a high-end professional emergency moving crew, drove straight over to the family home while Eleanor and Preston were at the airport boarding their preliminary flights, and instructed the movers to carefully pack every single piece of furniture, electronics, and personal clothing into large industrial storage units. By 5 o'clock in the evening, the house was completely stripped down to bare, echoing drywall. I then met the commercial buyer's structural foreman at the front gate. He handed me the certified corporate transaction receipt, and I personally watched as a heavy commercial crew boarded up the windows, locked the main perimeter gate, and placed a massive bright orange state condemnation and upcoming commercial demolition sign right in the center of the front lawn. Within less than 8 hours, I had legally dissolved the entire physical and professional infrastructure of their lives. By Friday afternoon, I had completely closed out my local bank accounts, put my beautiful suburban home up for premium rental, and loaded my triplets onto a first-class flight to Austin, where I had recently acquired a gorgeous, sprawling estate near my company's new tech hub. We left town without leaving a single forwarding address, a trace of our location, or a way to be reached. The absolute devastating implosion occurred late Monday afternoon when Eleanor and Preston's flights landed back at the local airport. Because I had completely cancelled the entire cruise package 48 hours prior, they had been stopped at the ship's main boarding terminal in Fort Lauderdale, completely denied entry and forced to spend their entire vacation budget on emergency return flights. Humiliated in front of Preston's wealthy future in-laws, I sat on the porch of my beautiful new Austin home, watching the sunset over the hill country while my children played safely in the grass. I unlocked my secondary business phone, and the screen instantly lit up like a Christmas tree. 43 missed calls and a torrent of frantic, unhinged text messages were screaming for my attention. I finally clicked on a voicemail from Eleanor. Her voice was completely broken, shaking with an intense, breathless panic that was entirely devoid of her usual maternal arrogance. "Vanessa, where are you? Answer your phone right now," Eleanor shrieked, her voice cracking hysterically over the speaker, while the loud, chaotic sounds of Preston weeping in the background echoed clearly. "We just got back from the airport. The house is completely gone. There are heavy fences all around the yard. A massive construction sign on the lawn, and all the windows are boarded up. The factory managers are calling me saying our global shipping licenses are revoked and the inventory is frozen. We are ruined. Preston's fiancé just broke off the engagement at the airport. Call me back right now. You are destroying this family." I pressed the button to answer the call, my voice sounding completely calm, chilly, and entirely detached from their manufactured crisis. "I didn't destroy this family, Eleanor. I simply followed your exact instructions." "What are you talking about, Vanessa? We are completely homeless and bankrupt," Eleanor sobbed, her voice dropping into a weak, desperate register. "How could you do this to your own mother over a simple misunderstanding about a vacation? You explicitly texted me that you only wanted real family on your luxury cruise, Eleanor." I let out a slow, deliberate whisper that cut right through her frantic breathing. "You forgot that the factory you ran, the house you slept in, and the global routes keeping you alive were all provided by the daughter you treated like an outcast. If I am not real family enough to sit at your vacation table, then my corporate money and my shipping networks are no longer real enough to fund your entire existence. The house has been legally sold, the factory inventory is permanently seized, and your personal belongings are sitting in a secured storage locker downtown. Do not contact me or my children ever again." Without waiting for her response, I hung up the phone, permanently blocked every single one of their numbers, and instructed my corporate security team to issue an immediate permanent cease and desist order to their legal representation. The tactical retaliation was absolute, quiet, and completely crushing to their superficial reality. Because the legal property deeds and corporate transaction logs left absolutely zero room for an emotional defense, Eleanor and Preston were left entirely powerless. With her global supply lines permanently cut and her factory inventory seized by my firm, Eleanor's manufacturing business instantly collapsed into total liquidation. To satisfy the massive corporate debts owed to my logistics firm, federal regulators seized all remaining corporate assets. Preston's wealthy fiancé was so profoundly appalled by the sheer unadulterated cruelty of their text message to me and the sudden chaotic exposure of their total financial fraud that she officially blacklisted Preston from her elite social circle. Unable to afford even basic housing, my mother and brother were forced to move into a tiny, cramped two-bedroom apartment above a noisy commercial garage on the industrial edge of Cleveland, working long, exhausting hours just to cover their basic monthly food costs. Now I stand on the grand upper deck of my thriving Austin estate, watching the sun slowly dip below the hill country horizon, my heart completely at peace. My firm has successfully finalized a massive new international logistics merger, and my children are thriving in the top-tier private academy in our new community. On my desk sits a small framed copy of that final text message. A constant reminder that true power never needs to scream, beg for validation, or tolerate the cruelty of toxic people to protect its territory. My family tried to use a public luxury vacation to humiliate my character, break my spirit and hurt my innocent children. But by keeping my head clear, relying on the unyielding weight of absolute professional ownership, and letting the concrete reality of financial truth strike at the exact second they felt completely superior, I didn't just protect my children's peace. I permanently built our freedom. My personal advice to anyone listening to this: never allow the toxic, calculated cruelty of status-obsessed relatives to force you into an emotional panic or a loud shouting match when they try to weaponize your lifestyle or reject your boundaries. It is a profoundly painful, heartbreaking reality to accept. But sometimes the people who share your blood are entirely blinded by their own superficial arrogance, viewing your quiet humility, your independent choices, and your silence as a license to exploit your assets while diminishing your worth. A parental title or a family connection does not buy someone a free ticket to run a public campaign of emotional manipulation against your children or your character. You should never waste your valuable life energy begging for a seat at a table where your dignity is constantly up for auction. When narcissistic relatives try to treat your presence like trash while quietly surviving on your silent generosity, maintain an absolute unbreakable silence. Trust entirely in the concrete power of your documented rights and let the natural consequences of their own reckless pride completely dismantle their world in its own perfect time. True family isn't defined by the expensive vacations you fund or the superficial photos you take to impress high society. It is defined solely by the genuine loved ones, the loyal friends, and the honorable partners who value your character, respect your independent life, and stand fiercely by your side when the lights go down. Walking away from a toxic dynamic and cutting off the financial life support of ungrateful bullies is not an act of malice. It is your absolute moral obligation to your own self-preservation and your children's future. Stay focused, protect your personal assets in the dark, and always put your own peace and dignity first today. Because an empire built on authentic integrity will always outlast a house built on borrowed pride.